Here's Brody Brazil.
Obviously, I get asked about the A's all the time, whether it's friends or family or neighbors or relatives or people I just met. And they're basically asking the same question over and over. They just say it in a couple different ways. Like, are the A's going to stay in Oakland? Or what's up with that new ballpark they're trying to build next to Jack London Square? But I understand the true root of the question, and it's this. Where are we at in the Howard Terminal ballpark approval process? Because it is lengthy and it is detailed. And let's be honest, it is very confusing to the casual fan who doesn't have every hour of every day to try and understand all the latest news and put the pieces together. So that's why I'm here in this video, to try and explain it to you where we're at in this process. I have an analogy that hopefully will make a lot of sense to you. And I've also done this video before. Yeah, about a month and a half ago, I basically did this, but some things have changed. So it's all updated for these very first few days of September 2022. And as I said in the prior version of this video, I have to give you this disclaimer. Everything you're about to hear and that I'm presenting is simplified. Otherwise, if I went into every last detail of every last angle, this would be a 2-hour video. I'd lose your interest, I'd lose your attention, I'd probably go way over your head a few different times. So I have to get right to the points here. I have to simplify and condense everything. Hopefully you understand that, so you don't think I'm missing things. I'm just trying to get to the biggest points, one after the next, after the next. Going back to this analogy, which I really think most baseball fans can understand, Howard Terminal is like winning a World Series for the Oakland A's. If there are shovels in the ground, that's kind of like the celebration of winning a World Series. And honestly, that's what this season and this calendar year are all about for the A's. It doesn't matter if they lose 100 games. What only matters is that they secure their future home in the city of Oakland. But to even, preface the conversation of playoffs, you need to qualify for the postseason in a regular season. And the things you're seeing here on the screen, they go back several years now, like the non-binding agreement with the port or the state bills that were passed in 2018. They laid the groundwork so that lawsuits that we're facing now, that we're seeing now, they've had to be expedited to be resolved in less than 270 days. The city had their term sheet last summer that was voted on, that was approved, that kept the process going. The county voted in their interest of yes to proceed with an infrastructure financing district in terms of paying for infrastructure around the ballpark with brand new tax revenue that they'll collect from the project site. And then one of the biggest things here and details that cannot be dismissed is certification of the environmental impact report for this project. It's a very difficult thing to make it as ironclad as it is and as thorough and thoughtful as it is. If it weren't, holes could be picked in it. The process through lawsuits and other objections and petitioners, the project could have been halted if the EIR were not as good and as strong as it turned out to be. But all of these things combined, right? It's important to not forget these. These are things that happened in the past. These were big victories over the course of, let's call it, a regular season. And these are the things that got Howard Terminal and the conversation really on the map with the city and the county. And that's why we're kind of now in the playoffs. And this process has already actually kind of got past the first round. I equated winning the ALDS to that BCDC vote that was positive back on the 30th of June. The San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, they voted yes 23-2 to remove port priority use from the Howard Terminal site. Essentially, they could rezone this, and if they chose no or they said no and voted no, this whole thing would have come to an immediate halt. And that's why I'm not exaggerating here to say that that vote in itself was like an elimination game for the Oakland A's and the Howard Terminal project. If a no was the result, the project honestly couldn't take any future steps forward. So that happens. That was a big one. It was monumental. And I understand it was not a city vote or a county vote. So maybe it didn't receive as much buildup or attention or priority. But make no mistake, that was a huge part of the process and things moving forward. So the A's are actually past the ALDS here. Right now, where do we stand at this moment? early September 2022, we are in the ALCS, the American League Championship Series, round 2 of a baseball series in the playoffs. You could easily say that this is the A's and Howard Terminal's biggest series. I say that because you know sports. You understand that sometimes the final round, whether it's the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Final, maybe the Super Bowl, is an easier game than the NFC Championship game or the AFC Championship game. And the same can be said in baseball. Sometimes a team's biggest opponent is in the ALCS versus the actual World Series. We'll get to what the World Series is momentarily. But this round is tough for the A's because they need 2 big things, and it's all under a time crunch. Now, there's been a lot of optimism surrounding negotiations, but we have yet to see a development agreement between the city of Oakland and the A's for this project. Once that's in place, we could then see a binding vote by the Oakland City Council, and they had been off on their summer recess for a little bit of July and most of August. Their next meeting is on September 20th. Now, it was never expected that they would be voting on this yet, but their hope and their idea was to have a financial analysis in place of the development agreement by the 20th so that hopefully they could take a binding vote on this eventually by the end of 2022. And that is important because with the upcoming November elections, it's not just time ticking to September 20th and their next meeting and getting something in place to be evaluated. It's the fact that the election cycle is going to bring a brand new mayor of Oakland and potentially several new city council members for Oakland. So it's pretty clear the positions of council members up to this point. You would have to think the ballpark project has been worked on a lot and it's fairly well received and everybody understands the background and the history of negotiations. If you just shuffle the deck and throw brand new people in there, it brings in a whole wealth of questions and potentially confusion and maybe even some delay to all this, which obviously would go against the project. So time is ticking here on 2 things that are, up to this point, talked about well, and we're told they're in a good place. We've just yet to see them move forward and actually happen. So a bit of a time crunch and some pressure here in this ALCS series. But that being said, there have been some positive developments that were maybe unexpected, or in terms of how they played out, they're very positive. You could almost say that right now the A's might have a 2-0 series lead in this ALCS, even though they don't have the development agreement or the binding vote yet from the city of Oakland. 2 positive things that have happened are this. A public vote was turned down by the Oakland City Council. And the reason I'm saying that's positive, right? Usually you want the public to have their direct say on things, but this was an opportunity for confusion, misinformation, delay on the project. The public has voted their officials, their elected officials in to do the homework, to do the research, to have the staff, to go over all the hard details that you wouldn't expect a member of the public to do all the work on. They've done this. So in a sense, the public has voted on this, but a public vote would have also been confusing because it may not have answered a direct question about an actual plan for the ballpark. It would have been a very vague question. Anyway, we're beyond that. The city council turned down the idea of a public vote on the Howard Terminal project. The other positive thing that seems to be moving forward is that there were 3 lawsuits against the Howard Terminal EIR certification. And a bit surprisingly, like I thought this would be something for November, potentially December, the Alameda County Superior Court Judge, Brad Seligman, has come out with his initial rulings. Almost all of them favor the EIR and the Howard Terminal project moving forward. He has said that within the next week, he may have final rulings now that he heard both sides once again just the other day with a court date with Alameda County. So again, the lawsuits moving forward, potentially inching towards conclusion. And like I said, with those 2 things happening, it does kind of feel like a 2-0 series lead in the ALCS, which, as we know, being sports people, doesn't mean the series is over by any means. But it's definitely a better position than some alternatives we could suggest. So that's kind of where we stand right now. Eventually, to complete this analogy, you have to understand the World Series would be, after a binding vote by the city of Oakland, it would be a binding vote by the county of Alameda. Then there are some other land entitlements, the State Lands Commission and the BCDC permit, not just the permit or the land use approval, the port priority removal, but a land use permit would also have to be enabled by the BCDC. And then there is actually one more lawsuit by the East Oakland Stadium Alliance against the BCDC regarding that June 30th vote. So it's not just the prior three I mentioned, there is one more. But winning the World Series includes a binding vote, all the entitlements, the permit, and the lawsuits resolved. Because once you take care of all that, you've won the World Series. You get the ballpark, and it's time for that parade right there. Groundbreaking is essentially the parade in this process of winning a World Series with the Howard Terminal Ballpark. So a couple other things I have to throw in here, as I always do. Fans do get complacent with this project because it's step after step. And it's not just Howard Terminal. They go back to the idea of Laney College, or maybe when the A's thought that building at the Coliseum was an option, or when Cisco Field was an option, or when downtown San Jose was being discussed. I get it. It's been a long time, and there have been a lot of votes and a lot of hearings and a lot of public meetings. Don't get complacent with this. Understand how many things and how many steps have already been made in this specific process to move it forward and to bring it home. Here are the things to consider if you're getting complacent. Number one, it's like sports. These are the playoffs. This is the important time of the year. This is what you played all season or all the last couple years for to get to this point. Number two, you've already advanced past a couple different rounds. Well, you got past the ALDS and you're sitting in a relatively good spot in the ALCS. You qualified for this, you're here. And number three, this is the hard part. This is also the rewarding part. Would you rather have Howard Terminal go back to 3 years ago when the city council never discussed it, the county of Alameda never had it on its radar? I know lawsuits are uncomfortable. These situations, they heighten your senses. They kind of get your adrenaline going, like what's happening here and will it happen in time? This is the hard part, but this is also very much the rewarding part of the process, as hopefully we'll look back on it that way. Yeah, these were the critical years. They were tense and they were stressful, but it's important to kind of assess where we're at right now here in September 2022 with the Howard Terminal Ballpark project. So if you have any other questions, put them in the comments section below. I will keep eventually doing like this very same video to try and keep you as updated as best I can. Thanks for watching.